Welcome back, dear listeners, to the next episode of Grimlore, the lore podcast for all your Warhammer fantasy and Age of Sigmar needs. Hello, everyone. This is Gerald once again. Right now, I'm nursing a hangover from our pints or 12 too many from last episode. And I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Rayway. He's going to teach me about the fantastic world of Warhammer Fantasy. How you doing,
I'm
Rayway?
still dying from a stab wound, but it's taking a while to kill me.
It's okay. I tried to strike that deal in the gash like we talked about, and I even used some of that ale that the stranger got me with kegs labeled Fenris, because dang, that ale was good, but it was so damn strong. Speaking of ale, I would like to introduce you wonderful listeners to the gentleman that sold me this ale. Coming in from Lorehammer, we have Mark.
Hey, I got my dwarven ale ready. I feel like, I'm not quite hungover, but we'll get there, I think. That's the goal.
And
well, we can't get hungover if you never
well,
stop drinking.
The dog it. Okay. Good technique. Thanks for having me on, guys. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we also have another guest join us tonight, Mr. Slappy.
What's up? I have my elvish pipe weed.
Ooh, I need to change my style, I think.
I'm very happy to be here.
Between the Fenrisian ale, the Elvish pipeweed, and other warpstone substances, I think we're in for a good night tonight.
That's good. I think I blew up one of my ears doing that. That hurt. All right. So how's everyone feeling tonight? Everyone good? Everyone loose? Everyone hungover or high as fuck?
All of the above.
I know what Mark's on, but I don't want to touch that stuff.
A little bit of warp dust, a little bit of just whatever I can fish out of the sea. Sometimes it's cocaine, sometimes it's just whatever, but whatever you got. I don't talk a lot of Warhammer fantasy lore, so I'm actually pretty excited. I've been Warhammer fantasy adjacent for many years, and I followed some of their campaigns and I've read codexes and stuff, but never really had a conversation about it, so it should be good.
That's great. Actually, if you don't mind me asking, what do you know about Warhammer Fantasy, Mark?
I think the biggest part that I was involved in with Warhammer Fantasy was during the end times. I got those books and I read through those end times books. But beyond that, it was kind of mostly just meme lore and splatterings of every faction. And, you read a 3rd edition codex of the Skaven, and then you also read a 9th edition codex of the Tomb Kings or whatever. So very, very sporadic.
And that's fair. That's a good way to do it, though. It's always good to have an idea of the universe, even if it's very, very sparse, very kind of spread out across entire editions.
Yeah.
And what about our guest Slappy over there? What do you know about fantasy?
Tell us a little bit about yourself here.
I am very new to all Games Workshop, Warhammer, stuff like that. So I have no idea about anything. I haven't read any of the books, haven't read any of the codexes, haven't followed fantasy at all. So this will be kind of a completely new learning curve for me out of everyone here, I feel like.
One of the nice things I like about GW is it all feels so familiar. You can get tossed into the Warhammer Fantasy universe and, you got your dwarves, you got your elves, you got orcs, all these super familiar things. And yeah, they all have their slight twist and their variations on it, but it feels familiar just stepping into it right away.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I'm interested to learn more about it because I do know didn't they just kind of bring this back into production, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they're making
well,
it's not so much a reboot, it's more of a prequel to Warhammer Fantasy. They're basically doing a Horus Heresy light, where they're doing 300, 400 years before the end times. And the concept is it's just going to be a small snippet of the world of just maybe of only a handful of factions, but they are promoting it, which I'm very happy to see, because it means that they're not just kind of going to release a couple models like I initially thought.
Just kind of throw it together.
And here we thought it was just GW's excuse to just reprint some old models and sell and just keep selling.
They weren't selling in pewter. Let's try and sell them in copper.
Yeah, there's definitely a GW employee somewhere working there, and he's had a grudge for 5 years. He's like, these guys got rid of fantasy and they brought in this AOS, like, and now he's been weaving his way through the GW teams, spreading his little verbal seeds on everyone, trying to come on, we can bring it back. Don't you like these guys? Don't you want to be cool like the I don't even know any of the factions right now, but
Pulling off
Bretonians
some Zinchian plots
don't you
here.
want to be cool like the Bretonians?
Don't you like the horse fuckers? No, I mean, no, of course, no. Neither do I. No, I don't like the horse fuckers. No, no. Oh yeah, weirdo likes those people. Proceeds to hide Bretonian Codex.
What Bretonians? Where?
Look at that horse. What? I mean, weirdos.
So maybe here's a good like entry question then. So with like I'm like a 40K player. So in 40K you have like 60 million years of recorded history, you know, and snippets all throughout. Like how big is the time frame of fantasy? Like, because you just said, yeah, they're jumping the story back 300-400 years or whatever. So does all of it kind of happen in the span of that kind of period, you know?
So Warhammer Fantasy is very, very much smaller than 40K in terms of the timeline. Like, honestly, the timeline is only around like 20,000 years at most.
Like, interesting. Since like the creation of their world or whatever, and then
yeah, the creation happens like over the course of like 10,000 of those like 20,000 years. And then after that, most of it is like backlog is like most of the story takes place over the course of that 10,000 year period. And most of like most of the creation myth of those 10,000 years is very much similar to like the War in Heaven of Warhammer 40K, where it's like snippets of this, snippets of that, and like, you know, yeah, it's like mixing different like creation myths from other races. Like the dwarves might say this, the elves might say this, and you kind of use meta knowledge to piece together, plus like what codexes say to kind of get the full story.
So it's definitely like definitely more of a mythos than an actually like hammered out event timeline.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
So I actually have a question for Gerald since he was on the last episode.
Yes.
Can you give me, just to prove that you were listening, and our guest a very quick 60-second rundown of what we covered last time?
Shit, I drank too much Fenrizinho when that was going on.
Just pause right now, go listen to the podcast, come back to us.
Okay, give me a couple hours and I'll be right on.
Bro, there's a huge spider crawling towards me right now.
Tell Sheila to go back to her hole, and we'll deal with that later. Right now,
Unless
we got a
she's in human
podcast
form
to produce. Okay, so to answer your question, Rayway, we were talking about how the creation of the world by the Old Ones and the Slan and the Skinks, who basically terraformed the planet because it was essentially a death world of a mixture of Fenris and Catachan. And then they purpose-built basically everything to establish all life. And oh man, this is a lot to condense into 60 seconds here. They created the Saurus and basically killed off a huge bunch of apex predators to make room for the elves, the dwarves, the humans, so on and so forth. And then the great catastrophe happened, where all the old ones mysteriously went out to go get milk and never come back. Chaos invades the world, in a style very similar to the White Walkers from Game of Thrones. The elves save the world because elves are apparently cool, I guess. And let me see here. Assyrian takes a sword and dooms his entire race to violence because everyone decides to choose violence that day, and this is why we can't have nice things.
Perfect. There you go. So you guys don't have to watch that last episode, because who wants to sit down and listen to me talk about that for 2 hours when you can hear this 60-second clip and know everything you need to know?
Hey, I work hard on those impression voices.
Marketing.
All right. So the reason why I wanted Gerald to go over that little previously on section was because this will actually be a continuation of that event, followed by a little bit of, so what last episode was effectively the creation myth, you know, the myth and legends of everything, followed by the great catastrophe, which is where like history starts for basically everyone else. This one will cover some stuff I left out because a 2-hour episode is a 2-hour episode and I can't fit. Well, I didn't want to push the 3-hour mark. So this one's going to cover a bit more of the Great Catastrophe and then leading into what comes after. And while Joe was right, elves did save the world in the last episode. This one actually involves the dwarves being involved because I did give our little stunties a little bit of I don't want to say I gave them short notice or anything, but I definitely didn't give them.
Got him.
I definitely didn't give them the status they deserve for someone of their weight.
Stature.
Exactly. Of their stature. You know, I can't disrespect the little people among us, you know.
I got a thing for midgets, so I'm all for this episode.
Keep the jokes coming, Ray. Keep the jokes coming.
Yeah, if I learned anything from Disney, we're no longer allowed to call them dwarves. So from now on, we're going to call them our little helpers in this episode.
Ah, yes. Yes. See, I prefer to call them freedom impaired, a little helper.
Freedom impaired. Fuck.
I can't read.
And we just got demonetized. Thanks a lot.
No, I didn't use a word I'm not allowed to use. I just said freedom impaired.
Yeah. That could mean anything.
Exactly. They don't need rights.
Holy fuck.
Oh, anyway. So during the event that was the Great Calamity, which was a great and a horrible calamity, the dwarves, like I said, hid in their holes and decided to hide in the ground because that was a smart option to do. But actually, I kind of lied because not all the dwarves decided to hide in their holes like a bunch of cowards. Among the dwarves was actually one of their gods, because unlike in 40K where the gods are kind of abstract concepts that may or may not have existed, in Warhammer Fantasy the gods are real and they do occasionally walk among mortals.
Cool, they can actually like manifest bodies and stuff, eh?
Yeah, the concept is very much how do I put this? The gods are very much kind of similar to like ancestor gods, where it's like you could either view every mythology as actually happening, or similar to how Gerald said it, it's kind of a forefathers kind of story where it's like, oh, maybe like the founder of this land, he killed like a snake, and generation after generation, it kind of grew and grew until like 10,000 years down the line, someone said, oh yes, the great king of old slaughtered a dragon by himself with his bare hands.
And he walked 70 steps and died from poisoning.
Yeah, so you kind of view it in any way you want, but I like to view it as similar to Elder Scrolls, where like everything did happen. You just can decide on what very much, you know, everything is true, not everything is canon, or whatever the fuck it is, whatever GW's cop out is.
Nothing is true. Everything is permitted. Oh wait, wrong franchise.
So, the dwarven god Grimnir, sorry, he was basically the dwarves' equivalent to like a war god. He was their version of Ares, and he did not like seeing demons at all because, you know, demons are asses. Because, you know, during the Great Calamity, demons are invading. So Grimnir decides that he is going to 1v1 hell. So he goes up to his brother, who is called Grungi, and Grungi is a very patient dwarf. He's a prototypical dwarf. He's the forger. He's the creation, the guy who builds things. He's, you know, the prototypical stocky, patient dwarf. Whereas Grimnir is very much the other version of a dwarf, the very short-tempered, very aggressive. You know, they're two sides of the dwarf stereotype taken to their extremes.
Dwarf after my own heart.
So Grimnir asks his brother to forge him weapons, which he does. And because Grimgi is the best dwarf forger ever, he forges up 2 axes, both of which are imbued with basically untold amounts of magic and enchantments, before giving them to his brother. And his brother decides, all right, I'm off, and basically charges straight into the North Pole to basically 1v1 an army of demons. Taking with him, he basically provided an open invitation to any dwarf that was exiled. So if you were a dwarf who was exiled from a hold for being a criminal or whatever, it was basically, hey, do you want redemption? Come join me as we fight at the gates of hell. And they basically charged. Literally. and they basically fought. Like I said, it wasn't like the elves and the lizard men did their part, but if it wasn't for the dwarves basically being, how do I put it nicely, cannon fodder, the other races the other races wouldn't have lasted as long, because dwarves are incredibly stocky and stubborn people. So like they might lose an arm, but they're gonna keep fighting because they're not dead yet.
They're badasses.
So you know that the dwarves do their thing. I'm not saying they save the world, but they definitely did their part to help out. At the same time, though, Gringy and Grimnir actually had a wife that they shared, who was also their sister.
Gross.
You don't understand dwarven culture.
No one look at Mark's search history, please.
Yes, delete.
Nestling Sweet Home Alabama in a dwarfish accent. So their sister, who was Valaya, decided that she's basically a healer goddess. She's not important because, you know, if anything, Warhammer loves women.
Oh dear.
They basically sideline her for most of the Great Cataclysm, because she's basically in charge of like creating runes and shields and wards. Although something that I do enjoy she does is she ensures that every single dwarf hold, which is like their castles, has a rune of warding on it. And the concept is, as long as these runes are on their fortress, chaos could not like enter. And it kind of gives me a Prince of Egypt vibe for anyone who's watched that movie, the animated film, where you use lamb's blood to like streak across the door, and it kind of keeps, you know, death from entering. It was very similar to that, where demons, like, they could not enter. It was very much kind of similar to like a no-go zone for demons and magic and shit like that.
That's actually a pretty good analogy to make there.
Yeah, like you know, I came from a Christian background and stuff, and you hear all about the Passover and stuff in the Old Testament, where God went to Egypt and slaughtered a bunch of Egyptians because, you know, he's a good, loving God and whatnot. But yeah, the Jewish people would put lamb's blood on the doorposts of their house, and then the Holy Spirit or whatever fucking avenging spirit God sent to kill everyone would pass over their house. One of the things I love about GW is all these like tie-ins where, like I was saying at the beginning, it all feels so familiar, but then they put this unique spin on it.
Yes, exactly. I agree 100%. It gives, like I said, it gives you the callback of the Passover, but in a very dwarven context, where it's instead of using lamb's blood, it's the goddess, their dwarven goddess, carves runes into every single fortress to keep demons out, which is both similar and incredibly different from the Passover.
You think she would have come up with something for the Skaven, but oh well.
Yeah, they did have a strategy for the Skaven. Die.
That's the opposite of living, my friends.
It's still a plan.
But I'm sure no one wants to become food for the Skaven. Skaven, food. Yes.
I feel like I missed a big part of this. I have no idea who the Skaven are.
Well, if you tuned into our first episode where we discussed the Skaven, you will know more.
I haven't listened to it yet. I feel bad.
That makes it even funnier. It's even funnier. So, during the whole event, as Vayala is passing across every single dwarven hold, which I gotta admit is pretty impressive, because it's a single dwarven goddess traveling across every single fortress of her people to carve runes into it while demons are assaulting her, which is a very cool concept that they don't do anything with, which I find it like there's no stories or anything. It's literally just she passed from one fortress to another, carving these runes in by herself while demons assaulted her and it tried to kill her, which is very cool sounding, but they don't do anything with.
Just her walking around with spears, pitchforks, and whatnot sticking out of her back, carving on runes. Like, oh, just another day in the office.
But once the elves, who clearly are the superior race, save the world,
bullshit.
Vayala would actually go missing, which I think is very interesting. She basically, during her pilgrimage, her goal was to travel to every single fortress and then eventually reach her most favorite, like the first dwarven hold, and that was gonna be the last place she carved this rune into. I don't know why the last fortress you go to is the one you love the most, but I'm not a dwarf. I don't understand
Because she
the
saved the best for last.
Yeah,
but
when you got a plate full of vegetables and a steak, you eat your veggies and your steak, you know.
of
Exactly.
course.
She's got her
Of
priorities
course.
straight, man.
Of course. Sorry, I don't understand the dwarven mind.
Have you grown a beard for this episode? Because that's what I did, and I feel like it put me right in the mindset.
I've been growing the spirit for this episode, so what are you talking about? What's your excuse?
What's your excuse?
I do have a beard, but that's besides the point. It's not very big. I'm sorry.
So
It's the thought
these
that counts,
gods
Ray.
and these dwarven gods, they can manifest a type of body. Do they describe the body at all? Like, is it stronger, more ethereal, maybe? Like, is it half in, half out, or like, do they have any description of what they
From how the dwarves describe their own gods, they're very much almost like they were just dwarves who were just better in every single way. Like I don't like it is they aren't bigger, they aren't smart, they aren't like physically bigger. They're described as being just as no different from another dwarf, except they just have something very different and special about them. Like Grungy, he's the one who forged everything. He's the one who taught dwarves how to forge. Like he is the one who is their teacher, the one who taught them how to forge. Vayella was the one who taught them runes, how to read, how to write, how to heal themselves. Grimnir is the one who taught them violence, how to fight, how to defend themselves. And they have a bunch of other gods. It isn't just these three. There's several other gods, but these three are the ones who do the most during the Great Cataclysm. But to summarize, they're described as just being dwarves who are very good and very proficient at a particular skill set, and they are worshipped as gods because of it. So it could be which is where the idea of the founding fathers theory comes up, where it's just like, oh, they're just very, very special dwarves who over generations have been worshipped into gods.
Yeah, okay, very cool. Interesting.
Yeah. Although I should mention there is a theory. I mentioned this to Gerald that all the races in Warhammer Fantasy come from 40k.
Oh, that's a theory.
Basically, the concept is the old ones exist in both settings, and the old ones in Warhammer Fantasy canonically travel not just through space but through dimensions. Like they travel to other realities in a multiverse, and they can set up basically basically webway gates on these planets that not only connect to one another, like they connect to every other planet in the multiverse that they travel to. And whenever they do this, they bring like soldiers, resources. In one theory, in one retelling, they actually bring like settlers, like refugees with them. And these refugees, they teach and they educate and they teach them everything they can. And they like set them loose onto the planet to like teach their children and their children and so on and so on. And obviously the dwarves is the one who like leans very heavily into this theory that the dwarven gods aren't actually gods, that they're just their ancestors, whereas the elves, they lean very heavily into no, they aren't settlers, they are actual gods kind of thing.
Yeah.
And me a little way to kind of marry the idea of how fantasy is linked to 40k, because I know that theory has been discussed ad nauseum between in several different communities. So that was an interesting little spin on that little subject.
Yeah, I've never heard that one. Like I've heard the kind of joke theory where Warhammer Fantasy is just some random planet in 40k that hasn't been discovered yet, and it's just full of random Xenos life forms, you know.
I mean,
But,
the Ultima Segmentum's pretty fucking big.
yeah, and then they have Sigmar, who apparently was one of the lost Primarchs or whatever. But that's all just, that's all conjecture.
Well, I mean, if I'm gonna be honest, the orcs are literally the same from in Warhammer Fantasy as they are in 40k. Like right down to the point that they come from space.
Interesting.
Yeah,
And
like
I don't know if it's true or if it's a theory, but I've heard that Age of Sigmar is on the other side of the warp, like out of reach.
that's kind of
And
cool.
it's
I
like
could
these two different
Interesting.
worlds on either side, and the orcs somehow ended up getting mismatched between the two.
That's actually kind of cool. Given
That
the
is kinda
layout of
cool.
Age of Sigmar, I can kind of see it being a possibility. Or like orcs just kind of randomly do a fucking like an orc warp jump and they just end up in the fantasy universe by accident.
That'll happen.
Time to go crumping, lads.
Oi, why these guys have spears? Where'd the bolters?
Where's the Daka? Why is all the Daka gone?
Ugh, I love the orcs. Ooh, but following the elves saving the world, and I emphasize that the Grimney would actually never return, like from the chaos from the doorstop of hell, but he would actually never be discovered. Like anyone who did return claims they never seen him die in battle. So there's actually a rumor, like it's very much a legend among the dwarves in the world that, oh yeah, Grimnir is still fighting up there. He's still fighting in the north, constantly fighting demons. And the reason why demons don't invade, or the reason why the demon forces we fight, we can always push them back, is because he's taking care of most of them by himself.
So he's basically a dwarf doom guy.
It's honestly a theory that I kind of enjoy because I love the idea that there is like just one guy just literally at the doorstep of hell, like fighting demons. And for reference, for Mark and our boy Slappy here, in the Warhammer Fantasy world, the North and South poles are basically eyes of terror.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
I was on your Discord the other day and I seen like the fantasy world map. I've seen like snippets of it, but I never seen the big full one like that. It was very interesting to look at.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on the layout of the world?
Yeah, like it was very similar to our modern Earth's geography, like they had yeah, just go look it up. Go Google an image of it and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. That was kind of the first thing I picked up, but yeah. Even in between, like I'll just call it North America and like Europe or whatever, they had that island in the center where in our world, some might think that's like Atlantis or whatever, but in Warhammer Fantasy, I think that's where like all the dinos are from, the Saurus people or whatever. Or that's
Well,
where they
funny you
make
should
their
mention Atlantis.
Yeah, it's gonna be really prevalent right away, actually.
Hmm.
But for reference, yeah, that's the best way to put it, is that the eyes basically, imagine I have terror on the North and South Pole, and Grimney basically traveled all the way to the North Pole where he was basically fighting demons and keeping them from coming south, basically. Like I said, Vayela actually disappears, and it's never stated if she did or did not reach the final hold. But given that the final hold was not breached by demons, or rather did not fall, it's assumed that she did reach it. But what happened to her after is completely unknown. As for Grungi or Grungir, he got kind of pissed off that his brother never came back. And so after the elves basically did a ritual to temporarily close the gates to hell, like the gates to the warp, he decided to put down his hammer and pick up a sword, and he actually led a countercharge against the last remaining demons, because while the elves did manage to basically stop magic from allowing demons to spontaneously arrive, he decided that there were still demons and chaos worshipping cults that were still all over the world. And he decided to have every single hold come out of the ground at once and lead a full scale assault against whatever demons were still alive and whatever demon and whatever chaos cults were all across the world.
Hey, someone's still got to be the cleanup crew.
Well, the elves were busy kind of, holding keeping magic from flooding into the world. They needed someone to deal with all the other problems. Yes. So, like I said, the dwarves they're pushing back because the dwarves are living in a massive mountain range at the center of the world, basically. So they can kind of just spread out across the region to kill any chaos cults that are alive, help whatever they can. But while the dwarves are kind of on their high peak, the elves are kind of not, because all the greatest sorcerers are busy basically controlling all the magic in the world and making sure it doesn't explode and allow demons to summon. As if that wasn't bad enough, the Phoenix King, who is the leader of the elves, and the guy who basically I don't want to say taught them violence, he more forced a berserker rage on all of them temporarily, actually goes missing. Like he just fucking disappears. he returns to the capital where he got the sword of Caleb and Cain, because Cain is a god in Warhammer Fantasy. He stabs the sword back where he found it, hops on the back of his big ass massive dragon, and just flies away and is never seen again.
Was this established to be around the same time that the dwarf goddess disappears?
Are you implying that they hooked up and then flew off in the sunset together?
Time
Well, they
after
were lovers.
time.
They could not be together because their love
Stop
was
it.
forever forbidden.
Stop that. No spot.
I'm just saying, it's a theory.
A game theory. Oh, wait, wrong one.
Although, well, the elven gods disappeared a while ago, so don't worry about them. They weren't involved. They kind of just dipped a while ago. But
Peace out.
Yeah. So, well, the elven gods disappeared before the calamity. The dwarven gods disappeared during. The human gods actually kind of showed up around this time. For reference, the first human civilization actually exists in what is basically Egypt, and the first human gods are actually in charge of keeping demons from invading what is fantasy's version of Egypt. According to their legends, the first human gods would spend 1,000 years purging the desert wastelands of demons in order to keep very primitive, very, very nomadic, and very barbaric human tribes from dying, basically, but it also kept them from falling to the worship of chaos, because there were a bunch of other civilizations and other human settlements across the world. And if you weren't in fantasy China or fantasy Egypt, you basically fell to chaos. You either became a worshiper of it or you were killed by chaos. Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah. But on the bright side, well, I guess there's another bright side because, a lot of people died. A lot of genocide was involved.
Just another Tuesday in 40K.
I know, right? But Zen Constellation, the dwarves and elves kind of recover a bit. Well, they handle the world ending and then not ending a bit better, because during this time, because the dwarves basically lost their gods who were in charge of teaching and leading them, the dwarves decide that the best option is to elect someone to become the High King, the person who will be in charge of everything, to basically rule them since their gods are gone. And their best option is to actually choose a child of one of the gods. Apparently, Grungi, the Forge god, he actually had a child. And this child was named Snorri Whitebeard because he was so old. Like, he was so old, but he was also so long-lived that he would eventually earn the title Whitebeard.
It's funny because you say
Crazy.
child of the gods, so I immediately thought like they elected a kid, like a toddler, just like straight out of his nappies.
Well, don't you know all dwarves are born with beards?
Only the best.
I like that title of Whitebeard, like it's that step that above Graybeard, yeah, very cool. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, like he is such a long-lived dwarf, even when he's elected, that he has that title, because like dwarves already can live a very long time, but like Snorri was known to live a very long time. Like he was long-lived even for the dwarves,
And
which
that's
I think
old.
is, yeah. At the same time, though, the elves did not have as easy. Basically, the elves and the dwarves have an almost like parallel history at this point. Like they almost don't know it, but they have a very similar journey that kind of reflects how they handle situations. Like the dwarves, they're very they're very community driven. So like they all like unanimously elect Snorri Whitebeard as the High King, and they unanimously like follow him and worship him. I don't want to say worship, but they all respect him as their king, as they should. Whereas the elves, there's actually almost like, I don't want to say a civil war, but there's very much a political kind of maneuvering. There's very much, everyone wants their piece of the pie. Everyone wants their chance to, get their step a bit higher on the status symbol kind of thing.
But nowhere near as bad as the Skaven, right?
No, because the Skaven is a conga line of betrayal.
Well, what you were just saying makes it sound like the elves kind of had it too, but just on a smaller scale.
Well, it was very much that because the Phoenix King was gone, everyone was kind of like, oh, well, who's going to be our new Phoenix King? Who's going to be the new one to lead us? Do we even need a Phoenix King? Well, we don't need a Phoenix King because we're elves. We don't need a Phoenix King. We can rule ourselves. We can be trusted to rule ourselves. Well, others were like, no, out of respect for what he did, we should have a new Phoenix King to replace him. It was very much kind of all these clashing ideas. And one of the candidates to become the Phoenix King was an Aryan, the Phoenix King's second son, who was called Malekith. Now,
I've
I
heard
don't
that
like
name
the sound of
before.
that name.
I've heard that name before.
Sounds pretty villainy.
Why does
Yep.
that name sound evil? Well, don't worry. Malekith's not a bad guy. Not yet.
Keyword being yet.
So Malekith was the second-born son of an Aryan who was the Phoenix King. Anarian's first wife and his first children, like his first wife and first children, were actually killed by demons, to his knowledge, which drove him to become basically a mindless berserker of rage. And because he was so driven by it, he actually didn't really comprehend a number of consequences, like marrying a powerful witch and conceiving a child with her.
Yeah, that could have some pretty bad consequences. Okay, but before you go forward, this is like the second or third time you say they were supposedly killed by demons. Is this going to crop up later at some point in time?
Oh, definitely.
Okay, I won't ask anymore.
Yes, I'll get to it when I get to it, as a wise man once said.
We'll get there when we get there.
So he would marry the witch Marathi, who is a powerful elven sorceress, and the idea was to marry her to use her sorcery to complement his own and his own physical power, an Aryan that is, and to cement their. It was more of a political and like power-driven relationship than anything else. Like, it was very much, you're a powerful sorceress and you have a lot of political power, so I'm gonna marry you because I want the status and I want the extra help on my side. And she was very much marrying him for the status as well. Like, it was very much, I'm gonna marry the king because he's the fucking king, and I'm a powerful sorceress, so no one can question me at that point. And it's also implied that Malekith's birth was only ever another step in the line, like, oh, I'm only gonna have his kid because I want to have his kid because it puts me higher on the status of power and political authority.
This is giving me a lot of King Arthur and Morgan Le Fay vibes when he kind of accidentally, conceived Mordred. Even the naming sounds very similar to me.
Yeah, I agree. Although Malekith is actually an elf in, I think he's a dark elf in Marvel, and I think in actual Norse mythology. I could easily be wrong about the second part.
No, you're right about the second part. He actually is a dark elf in Norse mythology.
Ah, good. That's prevalent then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of people were saying, oh, because he's the son of the Phoenix King, he's the prince, he should become the new Phoenix King. Even to the point that Marathi was like pushing, like his mother. She was pushing, oh yes, my son should be the Phoenix King. It's only right. His father saved the world, don't you? It was very much, it was very much like a widow riding on the success of her dead husband. So And the thing is, though, Malekith didn't want to be king. Despite the fact that his mother was very much grooming him to be egotistical, and his father was, I don't want to say an absent father, but when his single-minded goal is, I'm gonna kill all the demons and then fly off into the sunset and never be seen again, to say he got milk is an understatement. And despite that, he actually turned out pretty good, actually, like all things considered. Like, he actually viewed himself as unfit to be the Phoenix King. Like, he was young for an elf. So like probably like 200 years old. He
Only 200 years.
Yes, he was inexperienced in terms of government and warfare. He viewed himself very much as, I almost want to say, as an Aragorn figure in Lord like a Lord of the Rings example. Like, Aragorn abandoned his throne because he saw himself as unfit, unworthy. And it very much is a similar situation with Malekith.
Well, see, usually those kind of candidates are usually the best fit. But from what little I know of the mythological Malekith, that doesn't quite go out so well. So
yeah. Malekith, again, he steps down, he refuses the position. And so they actually elect a new Phoenix King to take his place, someone who would be a worthy successor. Who this one is doesn't matter because he's gonna die eventually. Spoiler alert. Oh my God.
How dare you spoil it? How dare you?
Malekith allows someone else to take the position of Phoenix King. But on top of that, to further add to to further cement that he actually is a pretty decent guy, he actually recognizes that because he stepped down, a lot of people view it almost, there is like conspiracy basically as to, oh, why did Malekith step down? Maybe he was bribed, maybe he was convinced, maybe they have dirt on him. There was very much like rumors and political espionage going around, and there was even like supporters who were like, no, he should be the Phoenix King. Yeah, he's unexperienced. Yeah, he doesn't believe so, but that's what makes him the ideal candidate. He could be someone who can learn like what it means to be a king. There was
Sorry, that was making me think of something from Life of Brian, but finish your statement first.
yeah, and Malekith realizing this, realizing that his very existence was almost like not good politically for like the unification of the high elves, like of the elven people, he actually decided, I'm leaving. Like he just hopped on a boat, took a few good loyal soldiers, and just left Uthwan, which for reference is the donut. It's the Atlantis parallel to help Mark get an understanding.
I'm following.
And the idea was, if I leave, my presence will no longer like be an obstacle in the way of the current Phoenix King, and it can help my people, live without me. Basically, get an idea of who I am without me around. They can kind of not rely on my bloodline and not see me as just the son of my father.
Yeah, it's kind of a big shadow to live in when you think about it.
Yeah. Now that's kind of something good that Malekith does. It's something that I enjoy about him. It's something I can respect about him. But there is kind of an issue, and the elves feel it. The dwarves don't suffer it as much. It's the lizard men who suffer it the worst. And that's
the lizard folks.
Yeah. So the lizard folks, as they will henceforth be dubbed, they discover something, and that's any memory of events before the Great Cataclysm are foggy. They're incomplete, or they're missing. Any memory that you might have from before chaos invaded is almost non-existent. And because the dwarves don't live as long, and because they're such a stout race who likes to record information and deeds on stone, they don't suffer it as badly. The elves, yeah, they're very ethereal, but they also keep records as well, and they don't live as long as a lizard man. But because the lizard men are basically biologically immortal, they suffer the worst. Like they are like basically anything from before the Great Cataclysm is gone. And because they were literally in charge of terraforming the planet and like keeping it at balance, keeping it at peace, not having the basic instructions on what their goal is, what their job is supposed to be, is kind of not a good thing.
I can imagine, but that almost seems like I don't know. It seems like it's coming off as like a fail safe on like the Slan or the Skink part, where it's just like, oh, all this crazy shit that happened before, just poof. What crazy shit happened before? What are you talking about? Okay, why are you bringing this up? Now come this way so we can discuss this matter in a dark room.
Don't mind the knife.
No one expects the Inquisition.
So this actually does fuck them up though, because if you remember, or for our loyal listeners who remember, and not for Mark or Slappy who haven't watched the most recent episodes or haven't heard the most recent episodes, the lizard men have a number of like temples all across the planet that are meant to basically stabilize magic. Basically all of them were destroyed when chaos invaded, and because they have no memory of anything beforehand, they actually can't properly rebuild these temples anymore. So any temple that is still standing is fine, but anyone that was destroyed or conquered by chaos, it's basically trying to build something from IKEA without the instructions, and half the pieces are missing.
It's kind of make me think of the Adeptus Mechanicus with like a lot of their STCs that they don't even know how to function anymore.
So what made these shrines or these temples so special? Were they just like huge, or like
they had a number of features. The concept was that every single one of these temples had to be perfectly positioned and built on the planet. Like every single one had to be built a very specific distance away from every single other one. If one's 100 miles away, then every other temple must be 100 miles away from every other one, kind of thing.
Yeah. Cool.
And the idea was that each one of these temples were basically meant to basically siphon magic out of the environment and kind of like distribute it from across the planet. So like let's say there's 100 magic around one temple, that temple can suck up the magic and distribute it so that only one magic, like one unit of magic, is everywhere else. So it's such a small amount that it basically has no effect on the environment or the world.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very much like a stabilizing factor. Or I guess a better way to put it is the one blank every 5 feet.
Yeah. Okay, so these temples basically, act as like warp conduits essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And during Chaos's invasion, most of these temples were destroyed.
Yeah.
And again, because these temples were destroyed, it also means that any magic that does exist in the world becomes even more powerful. But, that's the lizard men who are basically stuck realizing that they can't fix all the temples, and they basically have to fortify whatever temples are left. That does not stop them from expanding outwards and visiting temples that have been destroyed and trying to rebuild them, only to actually end up going missing. Basically, if a lizardman tries to repair a temple that's somewhere else, they usually go missing. Like the settlers go missing.
That's a little bit suspicious.
Yeah. I just think they disappeared. I think they realized, you know what? I'm gonna make like an old one. I'm gonna go get milk. See you guys.
Well, this temple's fucked. I'm out of here.
You know what? I can clearly see the writing on the walls. This planet is fucked. I'm out. See you guys.
Peace out, bitches.
Although, speaking of expanding, at the same time as Malekith is leaving, he doesn't just vanish. I'm just gonna travel the world as a hobo. A number of elven colonies actually started to pop up around the world, and his goal was to visit these colonies because they were also isolated during the Great Cataclysm, and he was going to check out them, make sure that they're okay, trying to reestablish communication and contact with them, see if they're okay, kind of thing. Being again an all-around standout dude, which is really crappy.
Okay, I'm actually about to break form here, and this guy actually sounds pretty cool, even for an elf. Why do I get a bad feeling that something really, really, really shitty is going to happen to him?
I know, right? Like that's the worst. Like hindsight's 2020, but holy shit, hindsight! I wish you would have been present. Because as he's going on investigating a number of these elven colonies, he actually investigates a number of them in what is the old world, which is fantasy Europe, and in Negaroth, which is fantasy Canada.
Oh yeah, fuck that place.
I know, right? Horrible, horrible place. I don't know why anyone lives there.
Says the guy that does live
Is it
there.
cold and miserable like the real life parallel?
Sorry, what was that?
Is it cold and miserable like the real life parallel?
Well, they will eventually have an oppressively authoritarian and tyrannical government, so.
Oh, that's nice. Oh, right on track. Perfect.
Who knew GW was able to predict the future?
Oh man.
But naturally, Malekith is expanding all across these places. And while he goes to Negaroth first, which is again fantasy Canada. Then he circles across the ocean to visit fantasy Europe, the old world. And while he's actually there, he actually ends up encountering like a number of chaos cults, like human cults that have survived that have taken up residence there. But he also ends up fighting orcs, like greenskins, and beastmen, who are humans or elves or dwarves who are mutated by chaos and turn into like chaos spawn, basically. And while he's doing this, he actually ends up encountering someone. He actually meets Snorri Whitebeard, who is himself going on a campaign to reestablish communication with his own dwarven holds. You can see the parallels happening here. They're very much mimicking one another.
Yeah.
And what do you think happens when the dwarf leader meets an elven? I don't want to say a leader, an elven prince. What do you think happens?
I don't imagine they'll probably be meeting at a tavern sharing pints of ale like we are. So,
Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm gonna say grudge match is about to happen.
Slappy, what are your thoughts?
I don't think this is a Legolas Gimli kind of story.
No.
All right, so to my three wonderful listeners here. All of you are fucking wrong.
Oh, okay. What happened?
You see, turns out, fighting together against a horde of greenskins, chaos cultists, and beastmen can actually bring people together. Who knew?
I've always said a little genocide brings people together like no one's fucking business.
Oh my fucking god!
I'm not.
Look
I'm
at
not
him.
condoning it. I'm just saying it.
Oh my fucking god!
Sometimes when there is only war, you can bring folks together.
Yeah, that's nice. Well, I'm happy that the elf and the dwarf are getting along. That's so nice.
Time
Yes.
after time.
Why do I feel like something bad's about to happen? Does anyone else hear ominous music?
This might be like a out of place question, but like, so you kind of mentioned briefly like beastmen were like a warp mutated version of humans or something, and going off that, like, are there any like half elf, half dwarves? Like, can they reproduce, or is there any mixing and mingling in that regard? Is that even possible, even through warp magic thing?
To my knowledge, there isn't any half breeds. It's very much a almost in-universe like joke, like in one of the Godric and Felix books, which is a story about a dwarf and a human traveling around the world for context. Godric, the dwarf in the situation, mentions to Felix, the human in the situation, that he must have some dwarven blood in him, and he immediately scoffs and says, like, that would ever happen. The my race would ever like lower myself to breed with you. Like that's even a possibility.
Says the famous quote of, "Oh yeah, we'll ask your mother that. See what she says."
Even in Warhammer Fantasy, there's still xenophobia.
Okay, that is interesting because that is something that you get in some fantasy universes where you're allowed this like cross pollination, but GW are purists; they don't want no shenanigans like that.
Well, they are Europeans, so
yeah.
Oh. So
sorry to derail that. Carry on.
No, it's a really good question. It's a really good question. I'm happy that I was able to answer it. Yeah, there is, like I said, to the best of knowledge, there is no cross pollination. Although I shouldn't really say that because there's also, I've mentioned this before, there's a race of dragon ogre hybrids.
Yeah.
Did you just say cross pollination?
Well, we don't want to say because that's how you really get fucking in trouble. But yeah, cross pollination.
And we just got the monetize again.
Family friendly.
Look, I've said it before. If you know the ship is sinking, the only thing you can do now is lay it on fire and speed up the process.
And smile and wave, or laugh maniacally. Whoa!
Look, we're going down. All I'm saying is I'm going to go down in a blaze of glory.
Send me out with a bang.
Or another one of my favorite quotes. Look, 1 sin or 1,000,000, I'm still going to hell. So why not make it 1,000,000,000 and go down a legend?
1,000,000 is a statistic.
Okay, but yes, to go back to Snorri, get back to the genocide of everything that isn't a dwarf and an elf. And I mean that quite literally. They actually did kill a number of human colonies that did spring up. And these weren't even ones that were like not chaos ones. They were just like primitive, like they were basically primitive human like barbarians, like Conan the Barbarian style. They're attacking you with like stones and fucking like primitive spears, and you guys are dwarves and elves like clad in the most regal like gallant armor ever seen, and like you can cast fucking fireball and bullshit. it's a fair fight.
So maybe here's my next question then. Do the technology and skill level and magic level of the elves and the dwarves degrade over time?
Actually, no. Not for the dwarves or the elves. The elves are still potent with magic. They're very similar to 40k ones where they can be prone to like selfishness, and that can affect their magic. Like they might end up, I don't want to say neglecting their magic, but it will actually like diminish their abilities if they delve too much in like selfishness, because it ends up causing them to see themselves and not respect their magic. Whereas the dwarves, because they're so like rigid and sturdy and they're so reliant, their technology doesn't degrade, but actually also doesn't progress.
Okay.
Or I shouldn't say it doesn't progress, but it progresses at like a snail's pace.
That's actually kind of interesting. And all the
Yeah.
all the jokes about the elves aside, it doesn't seem like the fantasy elves have that same duplicitous backstabbing nature that the Eldar do in 40k. Or at least that's the vibe I'm getting so far.
No, I agree. Like I said, the best way to put it is that their emotions are more extreme, which can cause them to be more selfish and more single-minded. But it doesn't mean that they are all like backstabbing people who are willing to kill to like get a leg up. It's just that they do have a level of self-centeredness that borders on like egotism. But I mean, what elf doesn't have a minor ego complex? But to further accentuate just how good like their bond actually became, like Snorri and Malekith would actually travel between each other's colonies to assist. So, like, let's say you're an elven colony, like you're an elven colonist that's being attacked by greenskins. You will have like basically a cavalry charge of elves coming in on horseback and like charging a bunch of greenskins, only to then see dwarves come in with literally cannons. Like I literally mean cannons and just
Awesome.
opening fire. So these guys are bonding. Like they're meeting each other. They're basically meeting each other's family. And to basically epitomize once their campaign of reconquering their region was fulfilled, they actually exchanged gifts. And these gifts are honestly kind of stupid, if I'm gonna be honest. I think they are anyway. Snorri gifted Malekith horse armor, like armor for his horse, that was made from metal that was basically unbreakable.
That's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, what's not to like about that?
I think it's stupid that it's horse armor because Malekith doesn't use a horse after this period.
Sure. Okay. There. Yeah.
That's why I think it's stupid, because it's literally just like, oh, here's armor for your companion, but your companion you're never gonna use. You're literally gonna have your companion carry all your cheese wheels, and that's all they're gonna do. That's what I don't like about it, because it's literally just like, here's the finest horse armor, and it's like, oh, cool.
The thought that counts.
Yeah,
Of course.
and then Malekith gifts this one. This one I like a lot more than the horse armor. Malekith gifts Snorri a chalice, but the chalice is not only is it elven crafted, which is the most artistic, most beautiful, most extravagantly well designed goblet, the most extreme beautiful chalice ever designed, but it's made out of basically Warhammer Fantasy's version of like mithril or adamantium.
What do they call that substance?
What the fuck is it called? It's some kind of like made up fantasy metal bullshit. I can look it up fast, but
I'll look it up right now.
All right, so made up fantasy bullshit is what we're going to call it for the rest of this episode, everyone.
It has henceforth been dubbed fantasy bullshit metal.
FBM.
From like my quick search, it's called gromil, GROMRIL. It's also called meteoric iron, star metal, silver stone, silver steel, or hammer knot armor.
All those sound way cooler
know.
than Gromil, I'm just saying.
Exactly.
Gromil. Yeah. Cool.
Again, I want you to imagine this. All right, your buddy just gave you horse armor, and you give him a fucking goblet made out of like Wolverine's bones. Like, you see what I mean? These gifts are like both stupid and like they're just too extreme.
But it's Warhammer, so it all evens out.
Well, it's what do you? I guess it's what do you give the person who has everything?
That's a good question.
Compliments.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, as a man, when someone says, "Hey, you look kind of nice today," that honestly, that'll
last 5 years for sure. For sure.
Yeah, they'll keep those thoughts away for a good 5 years. Even when said ironically. Oh, so you guys getting the picture? These guys are bros.
Bromance, yeah.
I'm getting that.
Would you believe me if I said they got even more bromancy?
Bang, 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 bang. Bang, 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 bangity, bang, bang.
Remember I said Snorri Whitebeard was a old dwarf?
Yes.
Well, he died.
Oh,
Just he died.
I wasn't ready for that. Fuck. Pour one out for my homie. Fuck. Here we
I'll
go.
drink to that.
He doesn't even die in death. He doesn't even why he doesn't even die in death. Wow, I'm fucking
He doesn't
stupid.
die in. So he made the deal with the gas.
Holy fuck. He doesn't die in battle. Like he is the only dwarf to die of old age.
That's actually pretty awesome if you think about it.
But
That
not only
is
that,
the ultimate flex.
the ultimate flex, dying of old age. But here's in Warhammer, I guess it makes sense. But here's the thing, though. When he dies, Malekith is actually there at his deathbed, and he actually has to fight through dwarves, like dwarven guards, to get to his friend. Like an elf should not be in the dwarven high king's palace, let alone in his own chambers. And Malekith literally has to force his way through all the guards to be at his best friend's deathbed. And because his best friend is dying, he can't just let my elven friend through. He can't exactly say that he's
Just
dying.
hopped on that horse with the unbreakable armor and just
Yeah,
plowed his
seriously.
way through.
Yes, I love a war crime. But when I say he was fighting through, I don't want to say that he was killing. It was very much it was very much out of the way. I want to see him. And when Snorri sees him, he smiles because it's after seeing Malekith, he kind of smiles, and that's when he dies. And it's kind of implied that he was holding on to see his friend before actually dying.
That kind of tugs at the heartstrings a little bit.
Yeah. I thought this was Warhammer, not a bunch of. Well, it's Warhammer.
Yeah. And as Snorri's dying, Malekith kneels before him, takes his friend's hand, and promises to him that as long as Malekith is alive, the dwarves and the elves will always remain friends, and they will always keep the peace between each other.
I'm getting a bad feeling about this.
Why do I hear Boston music? So what I'm getting is sad feelings and then a really bad death flag going on in my head. So, things happen. But Malekith actually being very, I don't want to say depressed, but very hurt by this event. Actually, at this point, he's still traveling around the world. He's still doing his own thing. He hasn't returned to Uthwan yet. And during his event, he actually travels to the east, to the far east, because it's the only place he hasn't been yet. And he's kind of just you know what? I have nowhere else to go. I'll just go here because I kind of want to get away from everything. I kind of want to get away from the familiar because it just brings back memories. And as he's traveling there, he actually finds an ancient city of the lizardmen, like a lizardman city. And if you guys remember what happens to someone who visits a lizardman city that's in ruins.
Oh, interesting.
Now, if the lizardmen go missing, what do you think a depressed elven prince? What do you think is going to happen to a depressed elven prince when he steps into a lizardman city?
Forget getting milk. He's probably going to be getting the hard stuff.
So when he enters the city, it's actually completely abandoned. There is no one there, no signs of life, for anyone. It's almost like the city was built from ghosts.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's fucking wild. And while he's kind of examining it, he finds nothing. There's no treasure, there's no evidence, there's nothing. And he's kind of almost disappointed, but also it's not so much oh, I wanted treasure, but it's more I was expecting more from this city. It almost screams there should be more here. Why is there nothing here?
I'm disappointed.
Yes. Until he finds a single iron crown, effectively an iron circuit. And I've played enough RPGs to know that if you walk into a town, you don't fucking pick up anything or put on any items. Malekith clearly has not played enough RPGs to learn this lesson.
What RPGs are you playing? Because I do that exact shit all the time.
A new hand touches the beacon. I just gave everyone PTSD listening to this who's played Skyrim.
I picked that up last night, and I got mad at myself for picking it up.
So, guys, let's take a guess. All right, show of hands. What does this Iron Crown do?
I'm not sure how to respond to this by a show of hands, but my hands
How
are
about
up.
a clap?
I'm clapping. I'm clapping.
See, that's the
Tell me
joke.
what happens.
I was hoping someone was gonna get the joke.
You have to explain the joke. It's not a joke.
All right, Mark, you go first. What does this crown do?
I think it turns him into a benevolent ruler.
All right, Gerald, what does this crown do?
I think the exact opposite.
All right, Slappy, what does this crown do?
Break our
I
tie,
agree
please.
I agree with Gerald.
Yes.
All right. So this crown, it gives him ADHD.
We were all wrong.
It literally says that in the codex, like the worst fucking GW writing ever. So he picked up
Yeah,
this
but-
fucking crown. It was kind of red and tarnished, and yeah, he put it on his fucking brow, and now he's got ADHD. Third
Worst
edition codex.
writing ever.
Basically,
It's been my disgust.
it removes his like inhibitions, because as someone who knows several people with ADHD, you do not think things through when you have ADHD. You kind of just do things. So basically, it makes it so he doesn't think things through. Like he basically just acts on impulse now. So
Oh, there's no
And
way
I
this
should-
could have any bad consequences later on in the
No.
future.
I should mention it isn't instantaneous. It's very much like a Fulgrim situation where normally I would say that woman looks kind of attractive, or normally I would say he's attractive. But my first thought is always, dang, look at that rack. I think I'm going to say that this time instead of thinking things through. It starts off as, small little, you say things instead of thinking them through. But over time, it starts to gradually start to become, oh, this guy hit me, I want to fucking punch him back, kind of thing. It scales up a little bit. Now it's at this point that Malekith does actually act on one of these impulses, and that impulse is, I want to go home. I miss home. That's his first instinct. That's his first impulse. It isn't, oh, I'm going to take over. It's, I want to go home.
Well, by
And-
itself, that doesn't seem like a bad instinct to have.
Yeah, that's the worst part. That's why hindsight is 2020.
We do not talk about that year.
That's actually a good point. That year did not exist.
What year?
We all have collective PTSD.
Okay, yes, Mr. Inquisitor, this one right here.
Seize him.
So Malekith does do that. He actually travels back home. He travels back to Uthwan with the full intentions of returning home to see his people. And the thing about Uthwan is that in the time that he was gone, Malekith had been hearing reports of what's going on with Uthwan, but he never gave them any heed, because none of them were really bad. It was kind of just the current famous king of Uthwan, who ruled since Malekith was gone. He wasn't a bad king by any means. He wasn't a bad king. He was very, I don't even want to say distant. He was kind of just yeah, he okay, who's seen House
Spit
of the
it out.
Dragon? Who's seen House of the
Yes.
Dragon?
Of course.
He's
I
very
see,
much king. He's
Say that
very
again?
much like King Viserys, where he doesn't make decisions. He kind of just lets things happen on their own, and he doesn't stop things, because he kind of just, like I said, he I don't want to say he was a bad king, because he kept, there was peace, there was no violence, but it was very much oh, I'm not gonna put my foot down, because everything's kind of chill, everyone's kind of getting along, so I don't need to put my foot down. I don't need to make any hard decisions. Everything's kind of chill, and if there's ever any violence, Malekith is doing all that. Malekith is fighting off the continent, fighting any battles that need to be fought. So if there is any war that needs to be fought, Malekith's doing the hard lifting of actually fighting. He's just ruling, and even then he's ruling distantly. But Malekith never considered these as anything bad, oh, he's being a distant king. That means I'm doing a good job. There must be peace, and if he's being distant, there's no reason he shouldn't be involved in ruling the kingdom, unless things are going so smoothly that he can just afford to be distant. Which I think is a good reason to have, except that's not at all what was going on.
Of course.
Because when Malekith returned to Uthwan, he was horrified to find that the entire kingdom, I don't want to say entire kingdom. Basically, pleasure cults to Slanesh had started to prop up all across the continent.
Ah, knew it.
And these cults were as small as like a hovel of like the lowest like common elves to like the high echelons of the ruling council and princes. Like they were stretched all across it from every single like class, every single geography place, everywhere. There were cults to Slanesh that were kind of like propping up.
Now, I know we talked about this in the last episode. What is the elf relationship to Slanesh in fantasy versus 40K? Well, 40K, for those that don't know, the Eldar, aka Space Elves, basically did these pleasure cults to the point of birthing Slanesh. So and as such, they are all of them eternally doomed to go to Slanesh upon death. So how does that work, I guess, in fantasy?
In fantasy, Slanesh already existed before the elves were made, which also gives like credence to the theory that the old ones brought Eldar to the old world to make, like, that's the reason why. But besides that, the elves don't actually go to Slanesh. Slanesh has a preference for them, but they are not doomed to Slanesh. So it's very so it's oh, go ahead.
Earlier in the episode, we were talking about all the demons and stuff that were being flooded into the material world. So these demons were, we could assume that they could be some Slanesh demons, some Khorne demons, some Nurgle demons, some Tzeentch demons, kind of the whole variety, not just like nameless, faceless.
Yeah, exactly.
Formless.
So like all the chaos gods are present in fantasy, and they have existed before the fantasy world was created. So Malekith returns to this, and he's kind of like distraught by this. He's like, why are there so many of these cults? And he obviously brings it to the Phoenix King. And the Phoenix King's response, like, it isn't that he doesn't care, but it's very much like, oh, it's just a little fun here and there. Like, I'm not gonna like involve myself in the day-to-day activities of the people. They're doing their thing. I'm not gonna step on their toes. They're enjoying themselves. Who am I to say stop having fun, kind of thing? Which I don't agree with, because demons invaded before, and one of the chaos gods was a god of pleasure and excess. And right now the elves are having a hell of a lot of pleasure and excess. I'm just saying.
Tisk.
Now, Malekith, at this point, is kind of like irritated. He wasn't angry, but he's irritated. And because that little ring circlet crown bullshit was causing him to act on impulse, his first impulse was, okay, fine. If you're not going to do anything, I will do it myself. And he decides to take it into his own hands, and taking his most loyal like soldiers and guards to begin rounding up every single one of these pleasure cults and either putting them to flame or arresting anyone who's part of them. So it was either you're going to burn or you're going to get arrested.
They did not have such thing as horny jail, did they?
Was Malekith aware of the crown's effects at this point?
He was not.
Okay.
Yeah, to his knowledge, he was kind of to his knowledge, it was more just like he was more just acting more on impulse. But it was never like, oh, it must be this crown. No, it was kind of just like it was so subtle that you kind of just assume they're your own thoughts, that you just haven't been acting, that you just recently started acting more on impulse.
Sure.
Yeah. And I should mention, he does a fucking fantastic job. Like, he does a fantastic job trying to avoid like killing. Like, his goal is like, you know what? I just want to arrest them. I don't want to have to kill unless I perfectly have to. And he actually stops every single pleasure cult, including the most prominent one. But it's when he stops the most prominent one, they discovers the person in charge of these pleasure cults, and that's his mother, Marathi.
Uh-oh.
Mom, you whore!
Oh, you whore! Wait a second.
What the deuce?
I feel conflicted. So he ends up arresting everyone, including Marathi, who's his mother. And this actually earns him like a shit ton of favor. Like, you would think your mother being in charge of like a pleasure cult would like make you look bad, but because he arrested his mother, it was kind of like, oh, even his own family isn't safe from him. He's bringing justice, and anyone who does wrong, even your own family, he's willing to arrest, kind of thing.
That's like a Stannis Baratheon levels of morality there.
Yeah, it's fucking insane. Like, again, he's so cool.
Stannis
It ain't no
Baratheon
Joe
and
Biden
Batman.
levels of rally, I can tell you.
What was that, Slaps?
Said Stannis Baratheon and Batman. What are you here for? Justice.
When do we want it? Now.
How do we want it? Please, not the face.
Violently.
I believe the words are, I don't have to save you.
Swear to me.
But the thing is, though, is that because he's, again, driven by impulse, he ends up actually visiting his mother in prison like several times to kind of like, I don't want like interrogate her, but also kind of understand her, because again, that's his mother, and he wants to know, why did you resort to like forming pleasure cults and bullshit? Why did you do this kind of thing?
Whore.
Look, when your father disappeared, I had a large hole that needed to be filled.
No, I was hoping you would say that.
Oh no.
Oh my god.
She filled it all right.
With several elves at once.
Mm.
But give me 1 second, okay? I have to step away for just maybe a minute and a half, okay?
Please stand by.
So yes, and our boy Malekith is visiting his mother. He does this like continuously, and again, like I say, the reason he does this is because one, he's driven by his impulse to see his mother, because he does care for her, even if she, again, wasn't a great mother. She was kind of, again, grooming him to be a king. He continues to visit her, continuously visiting her prison to interrogate her, but these interrogation sessions were more akin to like, Mom, why the fuck did you fuck all those people? Why did you do so? Why did you start these pleasure cults? And her response was always kind of like half-assed. It was never fully explained, but it was always kind of driven to a sense of almost guilt tripping, almost like it was very much a gaslighting kind of, oh, I did this because you left. Oh, I did this because I felt hollow because you were gone. It was always very much twisting kind of sense of like, because you were gone, no one cared about me. It was, standard motherly manipulation.
All right, mommy dearest.
That makes me worry for my mom. Like, I left Canada, so now do I have to worry about my mom starting up some pleasure cults when I'm gone? She misses me so much.
Well, you ain't going back to Canada anytime soon, so what do you have to worry about?
Okay, yeah, good point. Not my fucking problem.
Here's the worst. So hang on. What I'm hearing is Mark and Malekith are the same character, the same person.
It's all connected.
To be not have the best impulse control for sure.
You cracked the case, Rayway. Good job.
I just make jokes. So while this is going on, Malekith is discussing his mom. She does like every single one of these interrogation sessions. She like kind of slips in a little bit of her own kind of twisted mentality. And the problem is that because Malekith is already irritated with the status quo, and he has very bad impulse control, and he's been gone for so long, all these positive factors are almost like being twisted on themselves because of Marathi's like twisting of his own mentality of, oh, well, if you weren't gone, this wouldn't have happened. If you would have became king, you could like, you saw the pleasure cults in just a short period of time. Imagine if you were still here. Imagine what you could have accomplished if you were king. You were only back for a little while, and you already put a stop to everything that I had accomplished over decades. It was stroking his ego. It was manipulating him. It was gaslighting him, guilt tripping him. It was so many different factors that, on top of his own kind of irritation and very, very poor impulse control, that drove him to actually begin to agree with her. And eventually his interrogation started becoming almost education, because Marathi, while she was a leader of pleasure cult, she was also an incredibly powerful sorceress. And these two factors actually led to her becoming an incredibly powerful chaos sorcerer and a practitioner of dark magic, which is basically the most corrupted and evil form of magic available to anyone. And she started to teach Malekith these things. But in Malekith's mind, because he is, again, I said this before, the hero of his own story, he sees the learning of these dark practices as excusable, because it's almost like, oh, if I learn this, I can know how to better defeat my enemy. I can know how to better protect my people. I know how to better lead my people. I can't just learn the good side. I must be aware of what's evil in order to better understand my people. It was very much factor of, you're doing some really bad stuff. You're learning some really problematic ideologies and really problematic spells, but he's doing his best to kind of lampshade it to himself.
Trying to justify it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, not to derail this, but like when he wore I guess when he first put on the Iron Crown or whatnot, that sets off his, or messes up his impulse control. Does he just never take it off?
He does take it off to do his general things, like shower and go to sleep. But it's very much a concept of, it's almost like you instinctually want to put it back on.
Yeah, I feel like it's very much like the ring from Lord of the Rings, where it's like,
I was just gonna say,
even if you're not wearing it, it's still whispering in your ear.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's only the fact of even if it's off, you still have that. It's also the fact of you get used to the mentality of not you get used to not having an impulse control, that eventually, even if you're not wearing it, you still act on impulse.
So kind of like how Gollum turns into what Gollum becomes after 500 years, even though he's missing the ring like that whole time.
Yeah. It still lingers on you, and you get used to that. You get used to that lifestyle, even if you remove it. But yeah, plus you have to imagine he's wearing him wearing this crown is also stroking his ego unconsciously, which means that he's going to want to wear the crown more too, to flex his status and authority. But as a byproduct of him learning all this stuff and becoming corrupted, one of the thoughts in his head as a result of all this is, I could be a better Phoenix King than the current one. So he ends up traveling to the Phoenix King, who again trusts him because Malekith's been doing all this bullshit. He's been fucking flooring everyone. He's reunited all the colonies. Then he comes back and puts a stop to all this crime and indecency. Oh, he's fucking amazing. Which I think, the Phoenix King should have put two and two together, that maybe he should have been responsible for all that stuff, but it's just me. And Malekith comes in, and again, the Phoenix King trusts him implicitly, you're the best we have. You're the son of Anarion, you're the prince of everything. And Malekith presents something to him. He challenges the Phoenix King and tells him that you are not the Phoenix King. My mother has told me the truth, that you are a practitioner of the Chaos Cult as well. You are the one in charge of everything. And what happens after is unknown, because all that is known is the Phoenix King's bodyguards enter the chamber and find the Phoenix King having been poisoned. He drank from a goblet and was poisoned. And Malekith tells the guards that, being fearful of being caught, that the Phoenix King took his own life by drinking poison. But almost anyone can kind of get the idea that, I think Malekith might have smuggled in some poison.
Sorry, I'm allergic to bullshit.
I'm just saying, it's left open-ended. Maybe Malekith didn't do anything.
Maybe he's just an all right stand-up guy.
The Phoenix King was on that side of the room, okay? Malekith's on this side of the room. You can't prove anything.
Guilty until proven innocent. Wait,
what? You see, now I'm on the viewpoint that Malekith did nothing wrong. I'm just saying. No,
that's starting to sound close to someone else that you think did nothing wrong.
No, Malekith fucking killed that guy. I'm not gonna fucking pretend anything. I'm not gonna lie to myself about this. Malekith there's no way Malekith did not poison him. And the worst part is that GW writes it as, oh, no one knows. Only Malekith knows what happened in that chamber. But
Bad writing
Yes,
for
like
he
he,
actually did this.
Seems like he poisoned the dude.
But did he? Only Malekith knows. It's like, no, it legitimately looks like he poisoned the dude and then ran on the other side of the room to make it look like he didn't do anything.
No, the Phoenix King poured the poison out of his own ass and just chugged it.
Why would the king have poison inside of his own chalice that he drinks from?
Who knows? Maybe he gets off on it.
So that's called.
All right, 3 drops of aconites for my new latest poison high, and oh shit, that's 5. Malekith, I point the finger at you.
He was pointing his finger and screaming, "It was Malekith!" Clearly, Malekith must clearly poisoned himself. Now, clearly, this would immediately make people assume Malekith is, the perpetrator. But the thing is, Malekith was kind of a better king off the throne than the king actually was on the throne. Like, given everything I've said, you kind of got to see the point that Malekith was doing more for the elves than even the Phoenix King was.
It's kind of like how Tywin Lannister was like freaking boss at his job, even though he was never king himself.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually meant, and because there were a lot of people who, again, even before Malekith left, wanted him to be king, even though this was very clearly an act of treason, there were some who were willing to almost turn a blind eye, almost see it as the true king coming home kind of thing. And even if the lie was very clearly fabricated, a lot of people were willing to play along with the lie, because among the guards that came into the room and seen this, while most of them did, hey, let's fucking stop Malekith, some of the guards actually turned on their fellow guardsmen and stabbed them in the back with spears. And a number of other supporters from across the kingdom, hearing this news, actually rose up in support of Malekith and actually killed nearly all of the council members in charge of ruling the kingdom alongside the Phoenix King.
This really is like House of the Dragon. House of the Elves.
Now, not all of the council members died, but all the ones that were in support of Malekith, they fucking got off scot-free. Those that didn't, well, most of them were killed. And this immediately led to a civil war between the elves and themselves. Because we can't have good things.
Rule number 1 of Warhammer. Both settings. This is why we can't have nice things.
Because it's Warhammer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because this is happening, you would think that because the alliance between the dwarves and the elves, the dwarves will get involved. The problem is the dwarves kind of can't. Because if they get involved, if they protect the status quo, they should go against Malekith. But because Malekith literally was at the deathbed of their former High King, they can't exactly go against Malekith. But given Malekith's current very fast downward spiral, they can't exactly go with Malekith either, because
So rock hard place. Meet the dwarves.
Yeah. So as a result, they kind of brush their hands and let the elves have their thing. It was very much a look. You guys figure out who's in charge, and we'll continue our alliance with whoever's left in charge. Which I honestly think is the best option, because you don't want to be inside this clusterfuck of a political maelstrom.
Nope, and that actually sounds like a very intelligent answer to that.
Yep. Now, Malekith, again, being driven a little insane by everything that's going on, as well as an ego trip and the fucking crown, decides that the best way to end a civil war, because, again, as if killing the king and all of his supporting council members and making sure the only people who are loyal to you survive wasn't bad enough, he's like, you know what? I will stop this from getting any worse. I will do the best thing possible. And he decides to do a little public display. Now, Geralt, do you remember how the last Phoenix King was chosen? What he did to become the first Phoenix King?
He pulled the sword from the stone. Metaphorically speaking.
Incorrect. What did he do before he pulled the sword from the stone?
He beseeched the Sorry, I forgot his name. I'm sorry, I was drinking too much ale when that lesson was going on.
He was trying to beseech Assyrian, the Phoenix King, the original Phoenix King. Like
it was on the tip of my tongue, dang it.
Yes. The original Phoenix King, Anarian, tried to speak with all the gods, including Assyrian, the king of the gods, who's the Phoenix King. And when he didn't get an answer, he decided to step into the flames of Assyrian, which is a massive like plume of fire, which is
that releases his true form.
Yes, it burns away everything except your truest self. And Malekith decides, you know what? I'm gonna walk into that flame, and when I come out unburned and I have my true self, everyone will see me for who I am, the true Phoenix King. Because
this isn't even my final form.
Yes, because if someone who is unworthy steps into the flames, everything they are will burn up. Like there will be no true self there. Like basically, if you aren't true to yourself, everything burns up. You will just die. But if you step in and walk out unscathed, then you're deemed worthy by Assyrian. Malekith was very much not worthy, if that wasn't obvious enough.
Oh. Oh no.
Why wasn't he worthy?
Well, should we go back 10, 15 minutes and go through a list of everything that says that he was very much not worthy?
No, I'll take your word for it. Yeah.
As I play the rewind button.
So as Malekith steps into the flames, it is very much I am so drunk that anything I say will happen will work. Because he just kind of like he confidently struts into the flames while the city around him is like in civil war in an attempt to kind of display himself in like all his glory. And the moment he steps into the flames, there's a moment of like there's nothing happening. He is like unscathed. Like the moment his full body is into the fire, nothing happens. He's unscathed. It's burning him, but he's not feeling any pain. And then all of the pain happens as he's immediately engulfed in flames as his flesh is like burning him alive.
You are the chosen one, Malekith.
But the thing is, though, Malekith doesn't die. Like he doesn't die, but he doesn't emerge unscathed either. He's the only person ever to not instantly be burned into nothing, but also not emerge unscathed. He literally has to be dragged out by his supporters, like his guard who are there with him at this point. And when they pull him out, he's basically Anakin Skywalker at the end of Revenge of the Sith.
Good place to be.
Yeah, good place to be. Everyone loves being, smelling like a hot dog.
Smells like feet wrapped in burnt leather bacon.
Luckily, Malekith is dragged away. And at this point,
how many guards did it take to actually drag him out of that fire? Because I can just imagine, just like one tries to grab him, whoosh, he's done. Another one tries to grab him, whoosh, whoosh, and it's just like a conga line of just like, nope, they all burst into flames, boom, boom, boom.
Well, basically, Malekith is burning, and he's like, "Oh fuck, I need to get out of here." And he's kind of like, and he's making his way out, and eventually, like when he gets out, while he's like half out, then his guards pull him out. It wasn't like, let's put our hands into the flames of the god of all gods.
It's like, oh, Malekith, we're going to save you. Oh, my God, what happened to you? Get back in there. Get back in
there. Maybe he just needs 5 more minutes on broil.
Yes, timer's not ready. Just still medium rare.
But because the entire city was, engulfed in civil war, shit's not going great. Because of this, his mother actually ends up escaping. Well, she doesn't escape; she's freed because Marathi is his mother. She needs to be saved, and she ends up finding Malekith, who's not exactly in his best state. He got 5th degree burns. She decides. Well, she doesn't decide. She kind of is forced to do it. She ends up using magic as well as a bunch of other like elven like manufacturers and like forges to actually build him a special like armor that's made of the same, what is it called, like Grungil or whatever it's called, that unbreakable armor. And she forges basically a suit of armor that kind of like basically it becomes the Man in the Iron Mask kind of concept, where like it touches his skin and it holds them together, but it actually like melds the flesh to his armor.
So basically, elf Vader.
Yeah, but here's a fun fact though. In the flames, the crown actually burns away. So Malekith is no longer limited by is no longer driven by impulse.
But
He has 5th-degree burns.
more
You
like
win
eighth
some,
degree
you
burns.
lose some. You know, pros and cons
Well,
to everything.
yeah.
It's
Although
a trade-off.
I should mention though, when he comes out of the flames, he does come out stronger. Which is the weird thing. Because again, like I said, Malekith is the only person who gets the in-between of not being burned to a crisp, but also not coming out unscathed. But he does come out stronger.
We can rebuild him.
We have the technology, but we don't want to spend a lot of money.
We're not barbarians. We have technology.
Malekith, having been effectively resurrected by his mother, decides, okay, well, this civil war is going to go great. I'm going to lead the charge because I have unbreakable armor now. And it doesn't
Was
go
that
great.
armor repurposed from the horse armor that he apparently never used, like, after the whole thing with Snorri?
God, I hope so. That would make it way more interesting.
That would make it so much more poetic if that's how they did it.
To my knowledge, it's never said, which is at this point I didn't do enough research on where the armor came from, aside from the fact that his mother put it on him.
Okay, headcanon it is then.
Oh God, I hope it's the horse armor. Then that horse armor would actually be useful.
Exactly.
So Malekith, being basically wannabe Darth Vader, decides, okay, well, very clearly I'm not the Phoenix King, so no one else is going to be. and he decides, remember that magic vortex I mentioned that keeps demons from invading the world?
Yes.
Malekith's gonna, not make it a thing anymore.
Oh.
So
Do you see that demon trap portal there? Yes. I don't want to.
now this is where it kind of gets worse though, because his supporters didn't realize how driven he became. Because again, this flame, it burns you away till it's your true self. Malekith is apparently a crispy hot dog, his true form. But again, because the crown removed his impulse control, those impulses were still technically his truest form of himself. So even though he wasn't driven by impulse, he was much more in tune with himself than he ever had been before, even with the crown. And that isn't to say that Marathi's manipulation didn't do anything to him, but it was very much almost like he was aware of her manipulation and did as much good as possible to compensate for her manipulation. But it was basically you're trying to fight against your true nature, which is what she wanted him to become. Which I don't like because it pisses me off because it means that he wasn't actually a good person.
Sad. I am, as you were bringing all that up, I am sending all of you fine folk a fan art of Malekith. And he definitely looks like a Darth Vader clone.
Yeah, the black armor. Yeah.
He looks dope as fuck.
Oh, yeah.
Too bad you can't see his really cooked charcoal skinness.
Oh, give me a few minutes. I'll probably see if I can find something.
Also, he does use the Force. His magic, he can stop people with it.
Ooh,
so.
does he force choke out a fool?
He probably force chokes his mom.
He forces poison down people's throats. I know that.
I actually have a joke about Malekith. Malekith is just like Anakin Skywalker. Anakin Skywalker had a hard relationship with his mother, his mentor, and his lover. The problem for Malekith is his mother was all three.
Ew.
Like that.
A family tree more incestuous than the fucking Lannisters.
Why is it just a circle? When they said gene pool, I don't think this is what they meant.
Sometimes they say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Well, damn, and sometimes it doesn't even leave the pond.
So Malekith leading his supporters, who again did not realize the actual full extent of his goal, which was again to stop the magic vortex that keeps demons from invading. So like these people were charging headlong into like their brothers and sisters, believing that they were going to put the rightful heir on the throne, not realizing that the rightful heir had already been rejected by the gods themselves and had full intention of literally dooming all of the world, not just the elves, but all of the world back to a second great catastrophe. And how he does this is by disrupting the ritual that the 12 greatest mages of all of elven society had done to basically summon this massive vortex that traps magic in it. Like basically because the old ones' temples were destroyed, magic kind of just flooded out of the two eyes of terror at the North and South Pole. This vortex basically siphons all the magic into one location and basically like stabilizes it. Not perfectly, but more or less. Malekith fucks up that ritual. And because he does that, demons start invading again, and it allows chaos to return to the world. But here's a fun fact. Those 12 sorcerers, they didn't die. Because the warp is like an ocean, and time doesn't exist in the ocean, as we all know.
Yes.
Yeah, that's copyright infringement right there. You'll be hearing from my affairs on that one.
It's okay. We'll take it out in post.
Sorry. The warp is like
a pond. You can use
liquid surface that encompasses the entire planet. That is almost ocean-like in nature.
One.
Legally distinct. Because of its very fickle nature, every single one of these 12 sorcerers does not age, even though it's been, over 1,000 years since they performed this spell. And yeah, elves live a long time, but they're still going to suffer the effects of aging. None of these sorcerers have aged even a second beyond when they started this ritual. Like they are frozen in time, but fully aware of everything that's going on. And because Malekith basically freed them, they immediately were like, "What the fuck? Okay, that's it. Back to the ritual, guys." But the problem is that for the brief moment where Malekith did disrupt the ritual and Chaos was able to invade again, demons from the Northern South Poles were invading. But because the magic that was all being contained in the middle of the Elven capital was suddenly released, it was basically like dropping a nuclear bomb in the middle of your country, in the middle of your island country.
Oof.
Very nice.
Because remember how Uthwan is like a donut, like the Atlantis is like a donut? It didn't used to be a donut. It used to be a single solid landmass. It's now a donut because of what Malekith did.
That's cool.
It was also like bigger. It was also slightly like bigger. Like it was like wider. But the problem is that when what Malekith did, the entire like outlands, like the entire like shoreline, basically sunk into like it broke apart and sunk into the ocean, and then the entire like middle of the continent basically also like submerged. So that's the reason why it's a donut shape.
Cool.
Yeah.
So again, GW having their cake and eating it too of Atlantis.
Yep. Yeah. They wanted Atlantis, but they also wanted to still be around. So
let's meet down the middle. We'll make it a donut.
Yeah. But here's actually where things get really cool because Malekith, he failed, but he also kind of succeeded. He did more than Abaddon anyway. Realizing that he did not succeed, realized that he had no choice but to retreat. He didn't like it. He literally had to be like dragged away by his supporters, most of whom were as deranged as he was now, because basically you're not going to support him you're not going to support him if you see him try to destroy the world. Anyone who was still loyal to him were either so like batshit insane that it was basically like, you know what, whatever, we'll just join him. It's a lost cause for anyone. Or they were like, they were cultists to Slaanesh and Chaos in general. So it was like, you know what, let's just join him anyway. You wanted us to win. Yeah. They had to like take him away. And because of a lot of these supporters lived on the outskirts already because they were kind of exiled from societies for their extreme views and their pleasure cults, a lot of their kingdoms and castles were submerged into the oceans. But it's from these broken and ruined castles that this fringe cast of elves basically forged castle ships.
Castle ships. Did I hear that right?
Imagine a castle that floats on the ocean as a boat, like a battle barge.
Sign me up.
It's sweet.
Yeah, they literally put their castles again and forged these like several like massive boats and left Uthwan on these boats again. Malekith again had to be forcibly dragged basically because he was like, no, I'm gonna fucking end everyone. I don't want to fucking do this anymore. And
I want
he
to
was
die in glorious mortal combat.
Yeah. And these ships ended up actually traveling to Negaroth, which is Canada, which again had elven colonies on it. But the
Wait a
problem is
minute,
these
all this
elven
talk
colonies.
about all this talk
Oh, go ahead.
about ships made out of castles, and there's not one mention of them turning into pirates.
Oh, they turned to piracy.
Oh,
Yeah.
excellent. I'm starting
Yeah,
to like these
because
guys.
here's another thing though, because they sank the shoreline where the fleet would be. The elves did not have a fleet capable of challenging Malekith, who had not only his own fleet now made of that was also incredibly fortified because of his fucking castles. So,
Glorious.
yep.
I wonder if he
They-
used any like warp magic or whatever to help him make floating rock fortresses.
it was a mix of magic and just general engineering because they were like they are basically boats. They sail on the ocean, but they're literally like imagine a boat, but the bottom half is like riding on the ocean. The top half, where a normal boat would be, it's a fucking like Blackstone castle.
Metal.
And again, these are like massive. And they have cannons, they have fortresses, they have fucking like Baileys, they have all like a castle on the ocean that moves.
Nice.
Basically, imagine a mobile Alcatraz.
Very cool.
Yeah, and again, they end up traveling to Negaroth, which is where where some elven colonies are. These colonies were very quickly subjugated, and the population was enslaved
As you do.
Yeah.
because it was almost like petty and like I don't want to say pathetic, but it was almost kind of pathetic where it's like, okay, well, we can't beat Uthwan, so we'll take all of our rage out on these elves.
If anything I've learned in these past 3 episodes, when it comes to Warhammer, everything is petty.
Yeah.
You is petty, you is messy, and you is extra.
So this is where Malekith effectively sets up for most of the time, is that he's retreated to Negaroth, where he is nursing his wounds, and he is basically in charge of a pirate empire in Canada. Although I actually should note that over time, like Malekith has actually grown. I don't want to say regretful, but because he's become more like in tune with himself, and like once the rage and the adrenaline of being almost burned to death has like subsided, and he's given a moment to rest, he actually feels almost, I don't want to say sorrowful, but he does feel regretful for like his elves, that like his dark elves now, as they've become called, for how far they've like regressed. Because again, Malekith's instinct when he came back to Uthwan was to put a stop to the pleasure cults, meaning that his first instinct is to keep elves safe and secure, meaning that to realize once all the chips are down, once the adrenaline's gone, once the war is over, once he's done being manipulated, he's free of manipulation, that to see that his elves, that his people that he was leading are basically pirate raiders and worshippers to chaos, and it's almost like regretful. Almost, it's actually kind of cool. Like it does show some level of sympathy for himself and like regret for what he's become.
So he really is like elf Darth Vader.
Yeah, like the best I put it is like, imagine if the leader of the Drukhari like wanted the Drukhari to go back to being being standard Eldar, but couldn't. Yeah, funny. That would never happen.
Exactly. Not Vec,
But-
at least.
Yeah, that is like the best way to describe how Malekith is that he does not like how the Dark Elves have become. He doesn't like. Okay, it's fucking Horus. Why are the people on my side like deranged and broken things, but the people I'd want on my side are the most noble?
I am a master of broken monsters.
Exactly. I should also mention that it's heavily implied that he does study with his mother.
Study.
Yeah.
Is that what
Uh,
kids
because-
call it nowadays?
Late night
Well,
studying.
it's basically his mother is his teacher for dark magic because he studies under her because she's a master of dark magic. But you know, they
Hmm.
they can only imply so much because you know that's the joke about his mother being his mentor, his mother and his lover all in one.
Stop making magic, guys. I'm getting white energy all over me.
Oh god. That's what the dark elves. That's how the dark elves were made. That's how Malekith almost ended the world. Why Uthwan is now a donut shape. It's also one of the reasons why the dwarves and the elves actually start to hate each other, because while it is a smarter move politically, if your countries went through a civil war and you asked for help and no one helped you, it's France. It's French during the French Revolution when they asked America for help. Hey, America, can you help us? What's that? What?
No.
So, um, it's also something I actually really enjoy about Warhammer Fantasy because, like, I'm not sure if you guys picked up on it, but a lot of it, like, yeah, there's chaos involved, but a lot of it does come down to just the races and like natural like political events and like events that aren't only chaos related.
I actually, it's good that you bring that point up because I'm really kind of liking this. That it's like a lot of the failings and the as much as we've joked, this is why we can't have nice things. Very little of it so far is it was like secretly chaos, insidiously planting itself in our minds or whatnot. It's just like the humans' own failings, the elves' own failings, the dwarves being too stubborn and stout, so on and so forth.
Yes, exactly.
It's a very good point to make, and I actually kind of like that about this.
Yes, because like I made a joke to you, Gerald, yesterday. I think it was. That's like I almost forgot chaos exists in Warhammer Fantasy because like all the races have so many reasons to fight each other beyond chaos is there and chaos is manipulating them. That
Mm-hmm.
it's so like in 40k the Imperium fights everybody because they're xenocidal. It's not a bad reason because they're obviously like a religious extremist cult, but like that's all there is. Whereas in Warhammer Fantasy, the reason why the dwarves and the elves fight, well, there are several different reasons why they dislike each other. That has eventually devolved and become they now have an almost like race wide dislike between each other. Like right to the point that their first meeting was based on like friends. They were very much close friends to the point that the two empires literally traded with each other. And given where they end up, they actually end up hating each other and have had several wars between each other.
I kind of like that explanation for like the elves versus dwarves argument more so than the one that was given by the Silmarillion, which was like an argument over some treasure, something that or another. Correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't actually gotten to that point, but
Wasn't it the Cimmerils? Weren't they arguing over the Cimmerils?
I want to say it was, but someone more knowledgeable in Lord of the Rings, Mark, please educate us on that.
Yeah, I've never read a book before.
Yeah, it's all lies. I never read a codex before.
Yeah.
You're asking the crazy island man if he's read a book before.
If you want to learn how to butcher some chickens, I'm your man. But if you want to learn about all this fanciful magic and whatnot, I don't know what to tell you.
Well, I just
Yes,
feel
'cause
called out for my accent.
I mean, if we can depend on Mark for anything, it's he knows how to handle a cock.
Yes, sir. Yeah, no, very cool. I like I said at the beginning, like I'm a Warhammer Fantasy player, and it's so cool how similar fantasy and 40k are, but also so very different. Like the idea that like all the chaos gods were around since the beginning, yet like yeah, they're not actively playing a role necessarily, it's all very interesting how they've kind of tied it together and stuff. And even just like the Dark Eldar's fall in 40k, it's just straight up dark. There's no like redeeming qualities. There is no hero character. Where for the longest time, this Malkadeth character was a hero. He went on the hero's journey all the way to the point of sacrificing himself and having to be reborn, but unfortunately it just didn't work out for him in the end necessarily.
Yes. I believe there's a YouTuber I watch. I can't remember his name exactly, but he talks about the 7 ways to write a morally gray character, and I think and Malekith obviously is a morally gray character every step of the way. But one
Yeah.
of the steps he provides is a backwards world, and the concept is like if you do good, you're treated poorly, or your reward is poor. Your reward is like a bad one. Whereas if you do bad things, you're rewarded beneficially. And I think Malekith best fits that. He travels across the world, uniting the colonies, bringing everything together, and he is rewarded. But at the same time, he's also seen as, oh, you're the errand boy. You do everything for me in a way. And when he finally comes back, when he finally acts on it, when he finally wants to do good to become a king, he is rewarded with getting 5th-degree burns.
Does that Phoenix Fire, or I forgot what it's actually called, the thing that burnt him, is that still around in like current fantasy times?
Yeah,
okay,
every
cool.
single Phoenix King.
Because he said it was like,
it.
yeah, because he said it was like the power of a god or something like that. Can you just kind of reinstate what that was?
So the flame, it's a flame of Asturion. So Asturion Asturion is one of the gods of the Elven pantheon. He's also a god in 40k. Just like how Cain is a god in 40k, and he's also in fantasy. All the Elven gods are the same as they are in 40k as the Eldar gods.
Interesting.
In Warhammer Fantasy, the Elven gods disappeared. It's never stated how they disappeared, but when they did, they left parts of themselves behind. I think only one of the Elven gods, is still around, and I think it's like the Isha equivalent. She's not called Isha. It's just a different name. But otherwise, all the Elven gods have vanished. And they've all left some part of themselves behind. For Cain, he left his sword, and that sword, once it's drawn, awakens like a berserker, murderous rage in all the elves. Whereas the flame of Asturion is almost like an aspect of himself. It's an aspect of his godhood. And because Asturion is the Phoenix King, this flame burns anyone who steps into it and burns them away until only their true self is left. And if that person is like unworthy because they have no sense of self, they have no greater aspirations than to step into the flame, they will be burned into nothing. If they have some great deeds, some good aspirations, they are good at heart, the flame will burn away everything except that truest self, which is the good.
So the other question I had, like, is all magic then tied to the warp? Like, would this flame technically be like Asurion's like warp magic ability, like a spell he cast? Or
I believe it's an aspect of his divinity, similar to like okay, how do I put this? You know how in 40k the Emperor is technically a god because he can do miracles?
Sure.
That's what I would see it as. It's basically an aspect of his own power, because in Warhammer Fantasy there's 2 types of magic. There's natural magic, which the world, like the planet itself, emulates, or not emulates, like emits. Kind of similar to like how the Space Wolf says the spirit of Fenris, whatever the bullshit is. Like, you know how Space Wolves say they can draw power from Fenris to use their spells.
Wait, you actually deigned to bring that up. I'm proud of you.
Well, you gave it as a really good example, so I'm gonna steal it.
Okay.
But yeah, that's nature magic. It just permeates the world, and it's one of the explanations for why the planet's so many apex predators at the start. But then you have warp magic.
Yeah. So there are the 2 very distinct types of magic then. And like dark magic most likely would fall under like warp magic and
yes.
Interesting. Cool.
Yes. For those who want more information on magic, feel free to look at our previous episode.
The old world and beyond.
Beyond.
Magic, like if magic comes from the warp, people have basically any magic that comes from the warp comes from those from the 2 north pole, from the 2 poles, and the magic kind of pours out, and then it goes to like that vortex, Eye of the Storm shit that the elves have, and then what the elves do is they kind of stabilize it, and then it kind of like the magic kind of leaks out almost like currents, like currents of wind, like wind currents. And each one of
Okay.
these currents has a different like elemental theme to it. But they're not like elements like, oh, fire, water, earth, air. There are those elements, but there's also
Captain
like
Planet.
aspects. Yeah, there's also aspects of like existence. Like there's beasts. There's the wind of beasts. And so like let's say you want to cast a spell from like the wind of like if you want to cast a spell, you basically are pulling energy from one of these 8 winds. So like let's say I want to cast from the wind of beasts. I can like turn into a werewolf basically. One of the winds is fire, I can throw fireballs. One of the winds is metal, so that's alchemy. If I want to use alchemy, which is like, science and bullshit, I draw power from the wind of metal, which is alchemy.
Cool.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, that's a cool image in my mind of just like the unseen rippling waves of energy that radiate the planet, that people are kind of drawing down and tapping into, and very cool.
So instead
Yes,
of
it's
thinking
a
of
very-
like an ocean, think of it just like some currents and waves and air.
Yeah.
Yes. Because if Warhammer 40K uses oceans for the warp analogy, fantasy uses wind analogies. Totally.
I like
Yeah.
that. Oh,
Legally
yeah.
distinct, baby.
Legally distinct.
You'll be talking to our lawyer.
No.
Grim law legal.
Hey, Mark, want to be our lawyer?
Oh yeah, man, I'll get you guys sorted. My costs are extortionate, but whatever.
We can pay in a crisp handshake.
I'll accept. Hand delivered, of course, down to Panama.
Exactly.
Of course.
Now imagine this lawsuit in court. Now you see, Mark. Wait a second.
Now all this
But
fine
that's
discussion of Snorri and the dwarves and Malekith, as awesome as that is, I am curious. Like, does any of this make any kind of an appearance in Age of Sigmar after the end times, or how does that all work out? If we
Snorri-
can just briefly touch up on that.
Yeah, I believe Snorri does reappear both in fantasy and in Age of Sigmar because of I believe I mentioned this to you as a joke, the oaths. How oaths are actually magic.
Yeah, the one that you
Um,
forced me into.
Yeah. Imagine oaths are kind of similar to like almost okay, dwarves have a similar okay. I'm assuming this is a battle sword. The dwarves' oaths are very similar to the Sisters of Battle's power of belief. And what I mean by that is when Malekith makes the oath to Snorri that the elves and the dwarves will forever be friends. Spoiler alert, Malekith broke that oath. And what this means is because of how powerful this oath was and how strong Snorri and Malekith's bond were, it loops back around to actually resurrecting Snorri as basically an avatar of oaths. And he becomes what is known as the White Dwarf, which is a spiritual dwarf that is basically invisible, that's basically invincible, and he basically functions almost like a Saint Celestine or a Sanguinor. And whenever dwarves are about to fail, especially when it comes to like an oath to like hold a position or an oath to take a position, he will arrive to make sure they succeed at fulfilling that oath in combat.
Cool.
I wonder if the resurrected Snorri just pops back up in front of Malekith, like, dude, really?
Bro, what the fuck? We were homeboys, man. What the fuck?
You
I made
had
your horse
one
armor.
job, one oath.
But yeah, so like that's what it means. That Snorri's, like I said, Snorri's oath was so powerful that it does loop back around to basically resurrect him as a ghost, and this is several hundred thousands of years after his death, which is I think fucking impressive.
That
Yeah,
is
that's
very
cool.
impressive.
Any further questions?
I think I got my little list rattled on there.
I don't think I have any. I
Awesome.
overindulged in elven pipeweed, so I kind of
Ah.
spaced out a couple times, but you got the gist of
No,
it.
don't worry, I got this wonderful substance I can perfectly sell you. It's called Warpstone.
Make sure you take care of that stuff off the back of your neck first.
Yeah. no kidding.
I do have one question for Mark though, since he is you said you were a player of the tabletop, right?
Like I've played, I've never owned my own army. and I've definitely like been around people playing enough that I kind of know it. But
All right, since neither myself nor Rayway, neither of us really played the tabletop, and so we're just coming at this podcast from a lore perspective. What is there anything that we can glean from, I guess, like the tabletop side of things for fantasy? Like, how does it compare to 40K, and how does it compare to Age of Sigmar and all that stuff? Kind of before we wrap things up.
I think one of the things I really liked about fantasy, and this was only in certain editions of fantasy, but you would make formations and stuff, and movement was very important in that game where, you set up your spear line, and if it gets flanked, it's not good for you. So that made it really engaging, where in 40K, it's like you just blob your 50 orcs into the 10 space marines. It doesn't really matter. Even if you've ever played GW's Lord of the Rings miniature game, movement's incredibly important in that game. And, you got to line up your spear support properly, and you got to line up your bowmen behind people. Otherwise, all that kind of issues are going to happen. But I think that was the coolest thing about fantasy for me, was just how precise and how tactical you actually had to be with your movement phase.
Cool.
There's actually there's actually an interesting notion that relates to that, actually. Part of, I'm not sure if Mark can actually like give any credence to this, any confirmation, but one of the things I've seen for fantasy, the best way to like describe like the humans anyway, was someone took, the idea was, what happens if you took regular humans from our modern day era and put them against demons and elves and monsters and all that bullshit? How would they use like technology available to them in those moments? Like, how would a cavalry charge function against like a line of like orcs? Like, this was one of the ways I heard it described, was one of the like things that made fantasy so approachable and so appealing, was how do regular humans that have like shock and spear tactics, that have horseback cavalry, have just general like medieval cannons and guns, how do they stack up against demons? What tactics do they use? What methodology, what type of movement do they use? I'm not sure if Mark can give any credence to that, if he's heard anything, or if like, because like the way he describes the tabletop game functioning does seem very similar to like how I've heard it described to me.
Yeah, like that one might be a little over my head, to be honest. So I don't know if I really want to give an answer. But,
No worries.
but like, yeah, like I haven't played in many years, but yeah, basically, yeah, you'd flank people, you'd get extra attacks and stuff, and if you surround an enemy, then that's super cool too. Then you get like triple attacks and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know.
I got you. I actually have one more question for our two guests, actually. This one, though, does relate to our Discord, which is, we'll get to. Mark, you wanted the flair, I believe, for dwarves. Is there a particular reason? Has this episode, made you proud of your dwarven flair, or has it made you reconsider it anyway?
Yeah, no, I've always been like a dwarf fan. Something about just like that sturdy, reliable nature just really appeals to me, where it's just like, well, we got to dig a trench. Let's dig a trench. And they just fucking dig a trench. They just get the job done. And I really kind of like that mindset. So I've kind of always been drawn to the dwarfs in that way.
I got you.
Yeah.
And our boy Slappy, I believe you wanted Empire. Am I correct?
Yeah, but I didn't notice the dwarf tag until I was just looking at Mark's profile in your Discord, because I didn't
Only because
believe
that
there
was
a
like
dwarf
created
one.
like as of like 3 p.m. today. So
Yeah, so I didn't get that option. And I actually have a message already typed out to Rayway to see if he could switch it. I just haven't sent it yet.
oh, that's okay. I can take care of that for you right now.
Perfect. And I've always loved dwarves. Ever since like little kid watching Lord of the Rings, Gimli was my favorite character. So they always have a special place in my heart.
Slappy, you get me.
That's
I
fun.
actually
That's
have
entertaining.
3 dwarf armies for Middle Earth strategy battle game. So
Oh, fuck yes.
Oh,
So you're like a big Lord of the Rings guy.
yeah,
Tabletop. I'll have to shoot you a message after this and look at
Yeah.
your minis.
of course. I have a lot of them.
This is fun. I like this.
I think out of all 3 of the tabletop games GW made, Lord of the Rings was my favorite mechanic-wise. It was clean, it was balanced, it was fun. simple.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more strategic than the other ones. Like you were saying with 40K, it's just kind of like just throw my 10 Space Marines at this objective. But you got to be really kind of cautious with where you place your units, how you advance them, who you leave open. It definitely adds a lot more strategy to the game.
Yeah.
Well, now I want to look up this game.
The
Please,
death
wife,
continues.
I swear we can afford another. I can afford another war game.
Yeah,
Technically, it's the same
models are
company,
beautiful.
so it's all a part of the same budget. You know, it's all allowed. When we're not saying you can only do 40K, we're saying we're just GW people. Give us all the GW games.
Yeah, we shall add this to Grimlaw's GW budget tab. Yes. And speaking of budget,
business expenses.
and speaking of business expenses and budgets, we are getting a Patreon together in the works, just doing a little bit of research, and so you'll hear more on that later, dear listeners, and we will keep you updated as best we can.
Indeed. Any parting words from anyone? Anyone want to make a dick joke while they have the chance?
Man, my dick is a joke. Now, shout outs. Hey, if you want to come, listen, we have a lot of content. We were the #1 podcast for 40K for many years running. Go check it out. It's a lot of fun. Also, if you want to check out some of my other podcasts, I do Warhammer Listener Lore, where you listeners submit short stories. Gerald and Rayway are actually taking that over for a little bit as I'm working on some laptop issues. So go check that out. And my final podcast, it's with my wife. It's called Pillow Talk with Mark and B. And we just talk about life, love, whatever. Fuck it. We just have a good chat. That's all I have to say.
You made sure to keep his laptop sabotaged, right?
Oh, I'm still stunned that my dick is a joke. Give me a second, okay?
That was a good one.
Fantastic.
Thanks for having me, boys.
Yeah,
hey, thanks for coming
having
on.
me.
Anytime.
Yeah,
It was
thank both of
fun.
you for coming on. You're welcome back anytime. And Mark, be sure to bring some more Fenrisian ale while you're at it.
Yes, sir.
Oh. Oh my god. All right, I got nothing else to say. Just fucking end it.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Adios.
Later.